Hey everyone, it's Ryan, and today I'm going to talk about what it's like to be a medical student in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. I feel like this is a good video for me to look back upon one day, and I want to explain what it's like for someone who's in their first, second, third, and fourth year, because everyone is being affected so differently, and I will kind of give the general vibe that I've heard from each group. And right now I'm a third year, so I will explain what you do each year and then how it's affecting them. And I'm going to be very unfiltered and very honest because that's who I am. Okay, so if you like this video, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. I've been making videos a ton during this quarantine, and like it as well. Thank you so much. So let's get started. So, okay, when you get into medical school during your very first year, you essentially are like in college but on steroids. So all the content that you like learn in college, you kind of recap in the very beginning, but learn it in much more depth at much higher volumes and a much faster rate. And you also take anatomy. So the first year students, they already did their first semester. So, and I'm speaking from my medical school, and pretty much every medical school is like this. Anatomy is your first semester, so they already did that. It's where you cut through every single part of the human body and you like do dissections, and it's interesting. So that's normal. Essentially, first years, they're in classes right now, and everything kind of moved online. So it's pretty similar to a college kid. They're not really affected. I mean, they definitely are affected, but it's kind of similar to what you'd expect from anyone attending class. They're probably taking their tests online, and everything's moved to online lectures. So that's the first year students. I remember during my second semester, and every medical school is different, but we were doing modules. So I was in like nephrology and then cardiology at this time. So they're probably doing that online. And then next, we move into second years. And second years are kind of screwed, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think everyone's opinion is gonna be a little different, but the overwhelming majority of second years are really frustrated right now. So during your first 2 years, like I said, you're pretty much like a college student on steroids, studying a ton, going to lectures, doing labs, and then by the end of your first 2 years, you do something called Step 1. And Step 1 is like this big standardized exam. It's kind of like the MCAT of medical school, except the kicker is you can only take it once, and that score that you get is what you get, and it really limits and it defines what kind of specialty you can go into. So if I do amazing, I can become like, you know, an orthopedic surgeon. And if I don't, then I'm more restricted to fields. And I didn't do amazing on Step 1, but I still did well enough that I'm going into emergency medicine. But anyways, second years right now are in a big, like, rut, sort of. It's like they need to take this test, Step 1, but all the centers close down. And people typically study, like, 6 to 12 weeks for the exam. Like, have a dedicated, you know, put everything in your mind and then dump it out. And they don't know when they're going to take it. So I think most second years that I know are disappointed and they're confused about when they're going to take this big test, and then some aren't. So they also changed Step 1 recently, and they're actually turning it into pass-fail in 2022. And then what they're also going to do is they're going to make Step 2, which is something I'm preparing to take, like the main test. And I'll kind of explain why, but now there's a controversy of, instead of making Step 1 pass-fail in 2022, should we make it pass-fail now, because we don't know when kids are going to be able to take it. And it's kind of a mess. I'm glad I'm not a second year, to be honest. And maybe some people are happy about it, but I think the overwhelming majority, like I said, are frustrated because it's like, when can we start studying? The testing centers aren't open, and they don't know at this point in time when they can take it. So that's second year. I'm going to talk about third year, and third year is kind of complicated. So I'll start off with what we normally do and how we started. And essentially, third year is the first time you are put into the real world. You've taken Step 1, you know a lot of the diseases and everything, and now you're completely focused on becoming a clinician and working IRL. And so you jump through different rotations. Some schools have more than others. We have quite a few. I started off in OBGYN, and then I went to peds, neurology, surgery, internal medicine, and then I was in emergency medicine when all of this happened and they told us to stop going. And I'll address in 1 second what this picture is talking about. I essentially worked 8 hours with the doctor who tested positive, and I was one of the dozen people who quarantined for 2 weeks, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so third year is like this huge mixture of awesome because I love working with patients, I love meeting people and treating people and seeing stuff. I've seen amazing things and I've had some of the best experiences in third year, but I've had some traumatizing ones as well. It's really hard because not only are you working like maybe 8, 12 hours a day, maybe 6 days a week, but you're also studying on top of that. So you take like working and studying and then taking an exam at the end. It's a huge transition from only studying, and it's really tough. Like, you know what I mean? I'm gonna be honest with you, it's been quite a whirlwind for me. And at the same time, I really love it, you know? And you really get a glimpse of what it's like working with other people, working in fields you really enjoy, working in some fields that you would never do, surgery. And yeah, I've had a lot of experiences. So I'll be honest with you. I felt like an Energizer Bunny running on low battery around March when all of this kind of arose, the pandemic. I literally, like, I had maybe had 4 weeks off from like the past 18 months. I studied during my breaks for my step 1 exam. I didn't have much time off for summer because I studied for a long time for it. I felt like I was running on low battery, like I said, and it was kind of just like, I was go, 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 go. And then when they said don't come back, it was like, oh, wow, I have all this time to do whatever I want. So I talked about this in my first date to the Versace mansion, what it's like to date wealthier men video, which I will link below. It's done well in my analytics. And essentially what happened to me is I was on my EM shift. I worked 8 hours with someone, and then I went to Houston with my now ex-boyfriend, and I got this email. And essentially they were basically like, yo, you might have worked someone who got sick. And then like the next day I found out that yes, they tested positive and I had to self-quarantine. So I essentially was literally like right next to someone for 8 hours who tested positive for COVID, and they ended up doing okay. It was a physician who, of course, I'm keeping their identity anonymous, and they ended up being okay. I ended up not getting sick. And the other guy who I worked with ended up being okay too, but it was like, ooh. And there were classmates I had who got sick, and there were some residents, and that was not good. And that's when they were like, yeah, we need to stop the rotations, because it happened all over the country. So those exams that I take at the end of each rotation are postponed until we can take them in person for us. But I'm really like happy about it, to be honest. It's really nice just being able to like chill for a little bit, study at your own pace. And there are things that I have to make up later. I'm gonna have to make up the rotations I'm missing, but they're gonna be shortened. And I think now there's kind of more of a polarizing position, I think, for third years, because second years are mad they can't take step 1, but for us it's like, okay. We have step 2 that we have to take. We take like a written test, and then we take a clinical skills test, which is like going in and doing it in person, and, you know, being like a real doctor and making up a diagnosis and stuff. And that one might get canceled. It's a pass-fail exam. That one may not happen now, they're saying. I don't know. CK is something I'm still gonna take, and it's kind of like step 1, but it has a little bit less of an importance on like applying. But then also I need to start applying for residencies this summer most likely, and it's like, okay, will residencies like see my step 2 score? So I'm just gonna like, I'm chilling for the most part, because I really need this time to just be me, you know, and catch up. So they're turning stuff into pass-fail instead of lettered grades, and students in San Antonio are actually getting ready to start going back. So we're going back in waves depending on what we need to make up. I have not been called or chosen yet to go back. And essentially they have enough PPE now to where we can work, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. San Antonio is different than other places because we are essentially like not affected as compared to like New York. So yeah, medical students, we are there to learn. You know, we're not there to diagnose people. We're not, I mean, we do things, but we do it kind of behind the scenes, you know? It's like we come up with all this stuff and then we show it to the doctors for them to say yes or no. And so third year is really more for you rather than the patients. in that sense. Like, yes, I help patients and yes, I do them, but I can't write a prescription. I can't put in an order. I can help write notes and help residents and I can assist them, but it's like we're not essential. And with PPE being low, it's like, okay, we need to save it for the physicians who are like on the front lines, you know? And that's why third years have not been going back. We're starting to go back though, even though we're in the middle of this pandemic, because the PPE is being rebuilt back up and we still are important and we still do a lot and are vital. I've done some really cool things. I've saved lives third year. It's awesome. It's like things come to life, and I do miss the hospital and I am excited to go back. And it's interesting though. So when I apply for residency, things are going to be very different. So entering fourth year, you're supposed to do away rotations for emergency medicine. Most fields don't require away rotations, but you have to do a sub internship, which is, so you're an intern during your first year of residency. Fourth year is like sub, so below your internship. You essentially like audition, and I would have had to have applied to do away rotations in different places. And while I was excited to do aways, it's a lot of pressure. Like, you have to get an evaluation, you're being watched by people, and then they write what they think about you and say if you're in like the bottom third, middle third, or top third of students, and then it's like a mess. And that's a huge part of your application. And I mean, it's just a lot of pressure that I don't have to deal with now, which I'm gonna be honest with you, I want to go and leave San Antonio, Texas. Like, I want to get out of Texas, go to a big city, but I don't mind not having to do the ways because there's less pressure. At the same time, I did want to go places, like I did, and so it's just kind of like meh, like I'm gonna probably apply to residency and just go with it and start making up rotations next month. And yeah, we have to also see, will my interviews, you have to fly all over the country to do interviews, will those be digital now? Like, will those be virtual interviews? I don't know. There's a lot of what ifs and question marks. And it really all depends. And if I don't have to fly to 15 cities, it would save me a lot of money. That, you know, I'm in my childhood bedroom right now because I moved home to save money for fourth year so I could afford to like go to all these interviews. And now it's like, okay, I might be okay. And I understand that I'm very lucky and fortunate to be in this situation. And I think this pandemic is a good example of how healthcare is a very secure field. So if you're considering going into it, know that it is worth it. Med school is tough, but definitely worth sticking out. And then, okay, let me transition into the last topic, and that is fourth years. So fourth years essentially were really at the end of the finish line once this all happened. They're kind of like seniors in high school right now. You know, they matched in the middle of March, so right when the pandemic started, they had a virtual match day, and that's where you open your letter and see where you're going to residency. So they did that, and now some people are graduating early and starting to work, especially in fields like that I'm going into. Emergency medicine, I know internal medicine, it depends on what field you're in. I have a friend who's going into peds and he's not starting early because pediatrics is not as affected by this pandemic. And then, like, I know someone else, psych, they're not starting early. And it just depends where your program is as well. Do they need the help? And I guess they're kind of like out of luck. They don't get to graduate and have their formal graduation ceremony, which is sad. And you know, it's like, this is kind of their golden time. A lot of people travel during this time and relax, and I think fourth years are still doing it, but quarantined, which kind of stinks. But, you know, some people are happy about it, some people aren't. Of course, no one wants this pandemic. But that is really what the perspectives of the different students are like. It's a huge array, you know? Some people are in a much worse situation than others. I'm gonna be honest with you, I think being a third year is not that bad. It's, like, it's okay with me, you know? I don't want this pandemic, like I said. I'm just saying that if I were to choose a year to be during this quarantine, I would choose my third year. And believe me, it's not a flex. It's still like been hard. I still hit walls like everyone else does and feel kind of overwhelmed. And I'm still studying. But at the end of the day, like, there's a silver lining to everything. And I know that God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. And we will get through this. You know, I'm going back to the hospital soon. I will probably vlog about that experience. Obviously not showing patients or talking about anything specific. And stay tuned. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. I really appreciate it. Hit the like button. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on my Instagram. And with that, I will let you all go.